are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bill Baker. I'm with Firestorm, and this is the Crisis Coach webinar series that is presented by the New Jersey MEP in conjunction with Firestorm. Today, Karen Masullo, an Executive Vice President of Firestorm, is discussing why business intelligence makes you so dumb. We'd also like to invite you to become our friend. We need friends on Facebook. Firestorm Solutions is where we are there. And you can follow us on Twitter at Firestorm Soul. There is a hashtag. That hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm empowers you to manage risk and crises. Firestorm expertise is crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and consequence management. We do need to remind you that the presentation today is not complete without the accompanying oral comments and discussion, and this work product should be read in conjunction with advice from your organization's personal counsel. In addition, do not interpret this information as legal advice or legal opinion. Our good friends at New Jersey MEP underwrite this Firestorm series. This is the 5th in the 2016 series. You can go to firestorm.com where you can watch prior webinars in this series, and you can also register for future webinars. We're delighted to have George Savis with us today. Joe is not able to make it. He's got meetings with clients. So George, over to you and then to Blair. George?
Thank you very much, everyone, and good morning. My name is George Saves, and I'm the Director of Consultative Sales and Services for NJMEP. For those of you that are not familiar, New Jersey Manufacturers Extension Program, and we are a affiliate of the Department of Commerce under the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, and we have one main goal, and that is to help New Jersey manufacturers to become more profitable, globally competitive, and make sure that their company is against all other external factors, and we do that through a combination of lean productivity offerings as well as consultative services. And we're very excited to have this event today, and we've done quite a bit of very powerful things with Firestorm. So the only other introduction I will make is, as an advertisement, is our website is www.njmep.org. And if you are a manufacturer in the state of New Jersey, we cordially invite you to join our Made in New Jersey group, which will allow you to be recognized by NJMEP. It'll also give you as a qualified Made in New Jersey member, it'll give you 2 free admission passes to Manufacturing Day, which is a huge gala in the state the first week of October. As well as to have an interactive group of other manufacturers in the state that hopefully you can do business with. So thank you again for the opportunity. Thanks for attending today, and I will turn it over to Blair.
Great, George. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And again, I'll continue the love fest a little bit here with a thank you to NJMEP. You've been a big supporter of Firestorm, but more importantly, a big supporter of business continuity and preparedness for the last few years. So again, we appreciate your support and helping us spread the message and the good word. Today we're going to talk a little bit about data, big data, how to manage it, and we've got a treat with Karen Masullo, who manages our entire social media practice for us, and I think we're in for a treat. So Karen, welcome, and again, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining, Blair and George and Joe in absentia. Everyone on the call, we appreciate your taking the time to chat today. If you'd like to ask a question during the session, there is a toolbar, most of you, to the right of your screen for GoToWebinar, and there's a chat function within that. You can go ahead and type your message, and Bill Baker, our VP of Operations on the call, is our moderator, and if time allows, he will make sure that we see that question. If not, he will forward that to us at the end of the call and Blair will make sure to follow back up with you. You can contact us at any time at webinars@firestorm.com. You can contact Blair at bneville@firestorm.com, and we look forward to assisting you in any way we can. Today, what are we talking about? We're talking about why intelligence can make you so dumb in times of crisis. And I have to tell you, the reason this came up was a conversation I had with Firestorm President and COO Jim Satterfield, and we were talking about how much data was pouring into us every day on a variety of subjects that we were analyzing, and how at one point your brain explodes and you just can't take any more information. And this was in a calm. And I started talking to him about what do people do in times of crisis when the information overload is just too much. And Jim said the only thing you can do at that point in time is make a decision between two bad choices. So that was the impetus for this session. And we're going to talk a little bit about the influx of information. We're not going to talk about technology per se, but the influx of information to you and how that impedes or helps your decision-making process, and what you can do in times of crisis to create a better decision-making process for your organization and yourself. So one of the things I'd like to open with is a quote from Harry Rulin, our CEO at Firestorm. This is a quote that's taken from the cover of the recent issue of a magazine called The Letter. It's a hard copy magazine for the insurance professional, and Firestorm has a monthly column. And on the cover this month, we're talking about the rate of change, and technology changes faster than anyone realizes, and the rate of change is certainly one of the biggest exposures the world faces today. Individuals, those working in technology, are just no longer able to forecast, as we could in the past, what the trends and vulnerabilities and threats are of those technologies being created, because they're being created so quickly. Interestingly, Hollywood does a better job forecasting our exposures than people do, and I think Harry is a real fan of the Terminator movies, and that may be where that came from. You can visit our website at firestorm.com, and it links to a full copy of that article and that magazine. So let's talk about big data and content and what that looks like. 5 exabytes of content were created between the birth of the world and 2003. In 2013, 5 exabytes of content were created each day. Now, with all of this data coming in, generally, curiosity to find out more is an interesting thing. It's useful. I love the idea that if I don't know how to do something, I can go and find a YouTube video, and within 20 minutes it shows me how to weave a basket out of pine straw in my backyard. In our evolutionary path, knowing whether something that was rustling in the bushes was a tiger or a mouse meant the difference between life and death. That curiosity for more data is a good thing. We're wired to reduce uncertainty because our minds are adapted for another more hazardous time. In a crisis in your business, uncertainty is really going to keep you from making decisions. As a matter of fact, it might cause you to freeze. So what happens is we're fascinated with filling in those information gaps that we see, but that obsession with filling in those gaps can lead us astray, especially today when reducing that uncertainty has really become easy. So if you are in the middle of a crisis in your organization and you are missing some data in which to base your next, you know that it's out there somewhere, and you can get distracted in trying to find the data to support whatever decision you haven't made yet. We call that the seduction of data. In business as usual, in the normal course of your day, all of you on this call make hundreds of decisions. What data do you use to make those decisions? You may have spreadsheets that you request from finance. Marketing may have input for you. Operations may have some numbers for you to look at. If you have transportation vehicles, they may be sending back data to a logistics system all day long that you're analyzing. So there's a variety of data that you use all day long to make decisions and to vary decisions that you've made in the past. Every day we create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. I don't know what a quintillion is. I think someone who manages the federal debt might. But to give us some context, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data would fill 10 million Blu-ray discs, the height of which stacked would measure the height of 4 Eiffel Towers on top of one another. I appreciate the folks at Voucher Cloud trying to give me some picture of what this massive amount of data might look like. 90% of the world's data today has been created in the last 2 years alone. And every day we increase that by an exponent of it's just huge. How about that? I'll say that it's huge. So how do you make decisions on a normal day versus how do you make decisions in business as usual when every day the data that you're getting is more complex and there's more of it? And how do you know if you have the right data? So there are some different types of data we need to think about. The first is structured data, and I think we're all used to working with that because it gives us some order, especially in our decision-making process. Structured data is usually text files. It's information that's displayed in ordered columns or rows, and it can be easily mined with data mining or processing tools. So think of a well-ordered, nicely organized file cabinet drawer, old school visual, and that's structured data. Unstructured data is data that can't be so readily classified, and it's what we see an enormous amount of. And that may be social media messaging, millions of photos a minute being posted to Instagram and Snapchat, web pages, PDF files, PowerPoint presentations, things that are not easily structured. And then we have dark data. Dark data is operational data that's being collected by your organization. It's being processed, it's being stored in the course of your regular business activity, but we're failing to use it. We don't know it's there, we don't know what we don't know. To illustrate it, I made a drawing for you so you could understand what dark data is. The easiest thing I've ever drawn. All kidding aside, managing the data then becomes a significant operation in your business. One of the #1 growing jobs, or the #1 fields that are growing right now, is that of a data scientist. The problem is, if you're not really clear on what a data scientist does, it's really hard to hire one. So let's think a little bit about what it means to manage all of that data. First of all, you've got to be able to provide the right information to the right people in real time, accurately, and adequately. Well, the problem is we don't know what we don't know, so we're not really sure if we're being provided the right information at the right time. The thing that we must have when we have data is that it has to be able to support timely and efficient decisions that we make during business as usual and during business as unusual. And only the most important and relevant information has to be presented so that we're able to support those people making critical decisions. And we can support the responsibilities of those people making critical decisions to protect people, property, and products. Interestingly, when companies are asked who owns data, who owns all this big data, overwhelmingly they believe it belongs to the CFO. Now, in many organizations, the technology team reports into the CFO. In some teams, the technology team is under a separate reporting bucket. But overwhelmingly, people think of data, they think of chief financial officers. Next is the CIO, then the COO, then marketing, a little bit to HR, and then there's some other stuff sprinkled around there. What we really want to think about when we think about who does the data belong to, we really need to make sure everyone is at the table, especially those people that are responsible for the continuity of the business. There's a lot of important data that could be mined that can give you some really great insights into the life of your organization and the risks involved. So I want to talk to you a little bit about how decision-making happens sometimes when there's too much information. There was a study that was done called On the Pursuit and Misuse of Useless Information. It was a joint study done by Stanford and Princeton. And really what they came up with was this idea that decision makers often pursue non-instrumental information, information that appears to be relevant, but if it's just simply available, really has no impact on the final decision. Once they start pursuing that information, people then use that seemingly useless information to make a decision. Consequently, the pursuit of that information that others have no impact on decision leads people to make decisions that they otherwise wouldn't have made. That's dangerous. So what they did was, for a moment, everyone on the call, imagine you're a loan officer and you're at a bank and you're reviewing the mortgage application of a college graduate. They've got a stable, well-paying job, they got a solid credit history, and the applicant seems qualified. But during the routine credit check, you discover that for the last 3 months, the applicant has not paid a $5,000 debt to his charge card. What do? Do you approve the mortgage application or do you reject it? If you said you reject the mortgage application, you are in agreement with 71% of the people who participated in this particular study. Now, we're going to change things up just a little bit, and you're that same loan officer, and you're at a bank, you're reviewing that same application for that same recent graduate. However, there is the existence of two conflicting reports that make it unclear whether the outstanding debt is $5,000 or $25,000. You can't contact the credit agency until tomorrow to find out which is correct. So what do? Overwhelmingly, people put off making the decision. Not only did they put off making the decision, but once they were contacted by the credit agency and informed that the debt was indeed $5,000, that 71% of people who originally, with the simple information, rejected the application, suddenly approved the application. As a matter of fact, 54% of the people now approve the mortgage application, 21% rejecting. So this input of information that really had no impact suddenly changed the decision and may have not necessarily changed it for the better. The greatest obstacle to discovery is not ignorance, but it is the illusion of knowledge. Having this extra information and data come at you in a crisis situation may give you the illusion of knowledge, but it may not actually be in the best interest of the decisions you make in a crisis for your company. You know, in the past, technology moved very slowly. Actually, we thought it was fast. It turns out, in comparison to today, it was quite slow. As threats were created, we were able to identify them and mitigate them and create solutions to assure they either wouldn't happen or manage them in some way. Today, the rate of change has made it so much that information that occurred yesterday, that we learned yesterday, is irrelevant today. It's out of touch today. I stopped trying to have the most recent phone a long time ago. If I can make a call and do a couple of business things on my phone right now, I'm really happy. It's just impossible to keep up on everything all of the time. And all of these changes tend to isolate us into very defined groups that can only keep up with a specific technology. As data increases, sadly, confusion grows. How much more data do we have? How much more confusion do we need, especially in a crisis? Complexity doesn't equal clarity. If you've ever gone into a restaurant, you're really hungry, and you didn't know what you were hungry for. It's like going to the supermarket when you're hungry. You just buy everything. There are too many choices. So you don't have to make a choice. You get a little bit of everything. But people, property, and products aren't on the line. So we've got to simplify the data that comes to us in the decision-making process, because data without insight is simply risky business. Poor data, poor analysis equal poor business decisions. Let's look at this. If you just grab any data that you have in the middle of a crisis, pull anything, I need to see how many customers bought this particular product, and we're going to contact every single one of those customers and tell them it might chop their hand off. Well, that's assumptions that are being made on flawed data. There's a little bit more detail that we need to be very specific about a choice that we're making. If you just throw data at a problem, you're going to be in a weakened position. Or how about missing data? How do you know what you don't know? How do you know the other part of the picture or the story when you're asking for data to be delivered to you? Are you asking the right questions at all? How about when it comes to a lack of visibility? When we were talking earlier about overwhelmingly, most people say that the finance owns data. What happens when there is no transparency in an organization and that data is not being shared, and a decision needs to be made, and the information that you need or the data is siloed and you can't get to it? We have to identify, is there a problem with silos in your organization that's keeping you from getting the kind of information you need to make the kinds of decisions that you need to make in order to assure this? And then a lack of focus, it comes from when you have flawed data or incorrect data. It simply becomes a distraction. What happens is it's much like the loan application, where suddenly, because you have more integers, it doesn't make the decision any different. But in the study, it really did. People were distracted. You don't want to be distracted in times of crisis. You know, there's a way to think about this. It's a really simple way. I've just done an illustration for you. How many emergency exits do we have? Well, we've got 32 exits and 18 are covered by security cameras. Aren't we great? But in time of a crisis, what do we need to know? We need to know where those exits are. So if you have someone who has all of the data on the exits, but they don't know where they are, it's useless data. What about communications in a crisis? This is a client of Firestorm who put this in a report and asked me to review it, and I asked him if I could use it because I thought it was a really good point. Data-driven communications are a best practice but not the end-all. A recent study by the MIT Sloan Management Review at SAS Institute cautions against exclusive data-driven marketing and communications, and we should add in decision-making here. Rather, the study suggests employing a blend of information and experience guides decisions. Numbers may look good, but data does not assure all stakeholders are reached. While structured and unstructured data can provide post-project analyses, there's no guarantee that all messaging was received and understood by a particular audience. It's really important in crisis decision-making and communications during and after an incident. Because without insight, we actually have nothing. We just have a bunch of bits and bytes and ones and zeros. Information plus insight is what creates intelligence. We gather the data, we analyze it, we create insights from that, and that allows us to create actions. When Jim Satterfield and I were first discussing creating our predictive intelligence practice 4 or 5 years ago, we knew that we would have to figure out a way to focus in on very specific conversations in this huge mass of social and traditional media conversations that are going on at any given time. And it's an art where our analysts work very hard to understand the components of speech, syntax, what colloquialisms from one place to another, what drugs are called in one place, what weapons are called in another geographic location, so that we can really zero in on the conversations that we need, not private, so that we can aggregate the information and study that data so we can become better at our job of predicting behaviors of concern, but also so that we can alert you, our clients, when we do see a behavior of concern. Last year, we kept 3 guns out of organizations, schools, and businesses. We kept a knife out of one. We kept an escalating argument from turning into something more significant at another. What we're trying to do is catch behaviors of concern before they escalate into where you are in full crisis mode. And that is what our predictive intelligence practice is all about. It's about information and insight equaling intelligence, so that if you are in a crisis situation, we can help you make a better decision. How do you go about making decisions now? Some people are lone wolves, just make a decision on their own. I'm a great decision maker. I'm going to decide to do this right now. Other people bring their team around them and say, folks, we can work this way. What are your instincts? What do you think sounds best? But if everyone's in crisis, then how does your decision-making process change? When you need to make split decisions with your team, do you have a different process for that? Do you have a trusted, objective sounding board? Can you call up Blair and say, Blair, we're about to go to press with this press release about the most recent injury at our facility. Can you read through it and let me know what you think? What additional intelligence will help your team make those decisions during a crisis situation? You know, when you're making decisions in a crisis, one of the things that many executives don't realize is that almost all of the information in the data, all that big data that we spend thousands of dollars on making sure we have, most of it in a crisis is wrong. Data is not available in many situations, or not available as quickly as you may need it. You have no policies in place in which to assure you have a clear channel for decision making. You've lost command and control. It's out of control. Your brand and reputation are under attack, and today it's more than somebody telling a friend over dinner they don't like your company or your product. Today it's on social media, and it goes worldwide within seconds. Because of that, your leadership becomes involved, and they become personally engaged and may actually even be under threat because of the crowd mob mentality of social media. We all know on this call that we have read stories of a situation that may have occurred where then the CEO or the C-suite leadership of a company's personal information was leaked, personal phone numbers, personal address. Their children were threatened at school. And the impacts become disproportional to the actual event. And the events are escalating. They're getting wilder. Secondary events are occurring. And speed of decision making becomes critical. It can mean your very survival. And your issue suddenly becomes the center of media focus because they need a story. Every day they need new stories, and if you're about to present them one, they're going to ride it and take it. You are making decisions in the dark. And what if all of the data that you use in your general nights, everything's going well sort of a day, suddenly isn't available at all? What if it's just you and you can't get to anyone? I remember during a significant blackout in New York City after 9/11, the company I worked for, our entire C-suite and leadership team were at a meeting together in New York. And we had a blackout. The whole Northeast, if you recall, went dark. And our CEO, our CFO, our CMO, the president of our company ended up walking from Manhattan to New Jersey because one of them lived in New Jersey. We had no idea where they were. We couldn't find them. We had, at any given time, I think we had about 400 people in the air flying around the country. We couldn't find them, didn't know where they were. It was a really frightening time for all of us, especially those of us who had been through and lost friends and family when the towers came down. So we have to realize that we need to have a practice, process, and procedure for making decisions in crisis, especially if information is not available to us. Because as we discussed when we started, you have two decisions, and in a crisis, neither one of them might be the best decision you've ever had to make. You can choose this bad decision, or you can choose this bad decision, but you got to make a decision. You can choose this, or you can choose that. Now, well, what we'd like to work with you on, and through these webinar series, through the briefs, through our white papers, we really want to work on a predictive approach to crisis. We develop predictive, actionable intelligence for our clients. And through programs and plans and assessments, we want to help you target the threats and risks before they materialize in your organization. And if something materializes, we want to help you through that crisis process. Covering it up is never going to be a good idea. I think anyone with a Takata airbag today will tell you that same thing. As a result of having a practiced, studied, organized approach, there's going to be time for intervention. And in many cases, we'd like to be able to mitigate or eliminate the risk completely. Firestorm worked with a very large real estate investment trust, and one of the properties owned by this real estate investment trust was actually a combination of campuses. On the campus was an office park, 4 large parking garages, a hospital, and a huge mall. And at any given moment, there were 65,000 or more people on their properties and a variety of risks associated with that. And they thought they knew most of the risks that they were planning for until we started monitoring for them and developing predictive intelligence for them. Personally, I did not realize that many people were smoking blunts on the roofs of their employment, but obviously they are. And they are sharing that information on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other social media. Thank goodness they are, because we can see it. If it is public and someone puts it out there, we can look at it. And that's just one type of intelligence that we look at. But we were also able to pinpoint some maybe less amusing types of risks that occurred. For instance, one night, some people were locked in the mall after they left a movie. They had seen the late movie. They had gone into the restroom after the movie and delayed for a while there. And by the time they came out, they were actually locked in the mall itself. We also saw an instance in the children's area of this mall, where they had a dedicated children's area, that there was someone who might have an unsavory or unwelcome presence near the children, and we were able to alert security and keep intervening in that regard. We found that there was a fight club in one of the parking garages that met once a week. So there were just a variety of threats, and we were able to keep an eye on those types of threats, especially when there was a significant event. If there was a new Nike shoe being introduced and people were lined up for 48 hours beforehand, they were able to, increase security and make sure there were no fights or arguments going on during those periods of time. It's really fascinating. But our job is to hope and work with you to mitigate those risks. This is a quote from a client of Firestorm. Mr. Stanley says, I found the Firestorm team of senior level advisors invaluable in navigating a crisis and guiding our company. In my opinion, their counsel and judgment were instrumental, and we appreciate that. So what do? Well, what we work with you on is our crisis management maturity rating. And I want you to think about this now as you look at this for your company. Think about where you are in your decision-making process on your team, in your group, and as a company. The first stage is liability. Liability is almost guaranteed in this area because everything is a surprise. Your processes are developed always reactively. They're a reaction to the situation, and because of that, there's a lot of debate as to what you should be doing in regard to the crisis, decisions, communicating, etc. And if you call in experts, you call them in too late, and it costs you a fortune because you're calling in people in crisis. There are high levels of confusion. People are changing assignments. Nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing. There are no decision processes, so a lot of things fall through the cracks. It is almost impossible to obtain good data at this point. What you're getting is probably garbage data. And because you need to slow down to figure out what kind of data you need, you're going to be slow in identifying what other responses the organization has to be making. Your decision-making process is slowed to molasses. The events are outpacing your leadership. There is serious confusion, and the executive team is stressed to the max. Always remember the water crisis, the chemical poisoning of the water crisis in outside of Huntington, West Virginia, not exactly in Huntington, but when the CEO of the company stood there after not having slept for 48 hours, always a bad idea, and had a bottle of water in his hand when people couldn't get water. And he was so stressed, he was so tired, he was so unprepared. When he decided the press conference was over, one of the reporters said to him, hey, we're not done with you yet. And he turned around and came back to the mic. And it got much worse from there. That is what happens in stage 1 liability, and we've seen it. The messaging that comes out of the company is confused, it's highly reactive, the key channels are missed, the messages aren't timely, and that company that we just talked about doesn't exist anymore. It was sued out of existence. The next level is the reactive phase. Now, things are getting a little tiny bit better. There's a generic process that somebody grabbed off the web and sort of modified in order to make it fit for your organization. Roles and responsibilities are a little clearer. There's a little more data. There's some lack of timely decision making, and there are some generic messages. Pre-action is where we want to get you, and that's when you have a good defined process and structure. There are clearly defined roles and responsibilities. There's basic data that's predefined. There may be basic messaging that have been pre-created and are modified for this specific situation. The process and the channels are effective. Very rare that you have missed someone or something, a concern. And the stage we really want you to be in is a culture of strategic decision making. You have a clear playbook for major crises, clearly defined and established roles and responsibilities. Basic and event type information is predefined. And you have a highly efficient and timely decision-making process. Nobody's having ulcers because it's practiced, it's timely, it's organized, and you have a proven messaging process. Here's an example. Excuse me, I have a very large jet flying over my house. I don't know if you can hear that. My home office is vibrating. But this is an example of what a simple part of a much, much larger program or plan might look like. So we have an event matrix where it lists all of the types of things that can happen and the action codes associated with it. And these action codes include teams and their responsibilities. So everyone can look and see clearly defined and established roles and responsibilities. And as a company, resiliency is a brand attribute. It is a value. I want to turn it over to Blair to make some closing comments for us now. When we think about data and decision making and how we can help support you in decision making, Blair, do you have some input or comments?
Yeah, a couple things, Karen. Number one is I want to, you mentioned earlier in the presentation that just the idea of the tremendous amount of information that's coming into everybody today. I was a little bit amazed. I hadn't seen this presentation before, so I was a bit shocked by the numbers in the sense of the magnitude of them. Everyone's aware of just the kind of data that we're constantly seeing, and obviously will continue to grow. And I want to bring your attention to the concept of consequences, because as Karen was speaking throughout the presentation, she kept talking about the fact that in a crisis situation, you have to start making decisions, and if the data is not good, you've got a problem. You still have to make decisions. If the data is a little bit inaccurate, you still have to make decisions. And you know, I just want to make a comment that it's not always just in a crisis situation. With that kind of data volume that's coming in, there's a lot of liabilities and issues that create consequences. So when you start making decisions on this vast data, you have to be careful that with so much information, you have the right policies, procedures in place so that you don't get yourself in a crisis. You don't get yourself in a legal liability. You know, simple things like electronic discovery. You know, in the past it was if you were asked by a court for discovery documents, you know, you went to your files, you went to phone logs, and then it became email. Now you're starting to look at things like all your electronic information, tweets, Twitter, posting on blogs, Facebooks on your companies. What about your employees? If you give them authorization to talk about your company on Facebook, or they talk about your company on Facebook, then all of that information could potentially be discovery. So again, without understanding the parameters, you could get yourself into some real issues here with not understanding the complexity of all of this information. And it becomes your property. That's the key. Is most people think, well, it's on a Facebook page. The guys in marketing deal with that. I don't have to worry about it. Well, it is a continuity and preparedness issue, because if they're not prepared for it and don't understand where it is and who's retaining it, and if you have retention policies, are those being followed? That creates potential liability. And as the data continues to grow and grow, you're going to have to deal with that issue, and it's only going to get worse. Second area is things like human resource issues. As Karen said, you know, you have this growth of information in your business. And again, we're looking in hiring practices, for example, looking at Facebook and LinkedIn pages and other social media areas. Are your policies and procedures aligned with the legal requirements against discrimination issues? Do you know what those parameters are? So using that information to make decisions could have serious consequences, which equals a crisis. At the same time, what are those parameters? Are they shared around the business? And that could put you as an employer into some serious issues if you don't know what those parameters are. Also, the same thing is another issue, is that information all true? You don't know if someone's LinkedIn page or someone's Facebook page is actually theirs. So you have to be careful about what you pick up and what you take from a page, and because if you start making decisions on it, there are some consequences on it. So again, just coming back to that idea of the information flow is becoming so tremendous. It's becoming something that's hard to handle. Yeah.
Claire, you just reminded me of something, and I'm sorry, I talked a lot, so I didn't leave a lot of time toward the end here. So for those people that were a minute over or so, I apologize. But I just saw something the other day that you reminded me of, I'd forgotten of, and that is someone spoofed, you know, a profile on LinkedIn and said they were with one of the top 3 oil and gas companies. They then connected with someone who they knew was a vendor of that company. And they connected with that person and said, hey, Joe, I'm new in the position of such and such. Can you go ahead and just send me a PDF of that information? And they listed this information. So that, you know, scam that we've seen through email of people spoofing the CFO or the CEO's email, they're doing it through LinkedIn too. And you reminded me of that, and I just really want people to be careful. And every time someone connects with me on LinkedIn, I do a reverse search on Google of their image, of their photograph. The other day I notified someone of a really high-level editor at a publication that someone was using her image in a spoofed account. She was shocked. And it turned out that this account was using 7 other images from the bio page of their website. So you raised a really good point I'd forgotten about.
Yeah, it's great. And you know, I hate to say it, I'm an old guy, and you know, I approach things from the way I was trained. With so many millennials coming into the workforce, again, another issue, just my last point about this, they've grown up either always having a cell phone in their hand, or at least always having access to the internet, where some of us haven't had that, and we grew up at a different time. So they're used to being able to use these tools efficiently, I don't know always effectively, but they're used to having all this information at their fingertips. So we've seen problems where people tend to get a little cavalier with it. So that's what I was saying was, when it comes to your human resource issues, comes to your legal issues, it's okay to use the data, and as Karen said, in a crisis you might have to, but having some plans, having your regulations in place, having your policies and retention documentations understood by everyone who's using them is really the key. Again, that Predict.Plan.Perform model, understanding what your risks are when you use the data, putting a plan in place to use it, and then using it. So it's good. Again, we're not trying to scare anybody. It's just knowing what the gates are and being able to put the parameters around them so that you can use it not only efficiently but effectively. And again, I'd like to just close two last things. We do have a brief we write for each of our webinars. It'll be available. Karen, is it available, or it'll be available in a day or so? If anyone's interested.
Mm-hmm.
It is available now?
It should be available later on today.
Okay. We can jump on our website or shoot me a quick email, and I'll forward it to you, and we'll get you that information. And it'll summarize the points and any questions that might have come in while we were on the line here, or any questions that come in shortly afterwards. And finally, again, NJMEP, thank you for your support. We really appreciate it, and we'll continue on with these webinars next month. Karen, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Blair. Thank you, NJMEP. Great. Again, if you have any questions, please contact us at webinars@firestorm.com or bneville@firestorm.com if you'd like to chat with Blair specifically. We appreciate your time, and this will conclude our webinar for today. Thanks, and have a great day.
Great. Bye now.